Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak, your podcast available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Monday, the 3rd of March. Here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker. Coming up today, Ukraine's European allies race to get Zelenskyy back to the table with Trump after Friday's public bust-up. The US is preparing to implement a barrage of tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China in less than 24 hours' time. Plus, the Oscars go indie. Anora wins 5 awards. The brutalist Adrian Brody gets Best Actor. Zoe Saldana wins Best Supporting Actress for Emilia Perez. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. 2 days after Zelenskyy and Trump's Oval Office blow-up, European leaders are still scrambling to repair the damage. On Sunday, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and other European leaders used a security summit in London to demonstrate broad support for Ukraine. Behind the scenes, though, they were pushing to get Volodymyr Zelenskiy back to the table with President Donald Trump. Speaking after the summit, Starmer said the UK and France are now working on a plan to secure Ukraine after any US brokered ceasefire.
So we agreed some important steps today. First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back.
Starmer's comments came as French President Emmanuel Macron said the two leaders are working on a plan to secure a 1-month truce in Ukraine. In an interview with Le Figaro newspaper, Macron said the potential truce would include ground and maritime operations as well as energy infrastructure. He added that soldiers would only be deployed on the ground in a second phase with, quote, no European troops on Ukrainian soil in the coming weeks. Mending ties between Trump and Zelenskyy following their unprecedented public row won't be easy. While European allies have rushed to express support for the war-torn country's leader, the US has made it clear it wants a public apology. Here's what President Trump's Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, told Fox News Sunday.
There's going to have to be a rebuilding of any kind of interest in good faith negotiations, I think, before President Trump is going to be willing to re-engage on this.
Gabbard's comments on Fox News were echoed by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who said Zelenskyy needs to come to the, quote, realization that America is trying to help. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy says that he's willing to meet Donald Trump if the US president invites him again. Here's what he said in response to a question from the BBC after attending that security summit in London.
Perhaps there is a need in time to analyze certain things, but I would just want Ukrainian position to be heard. It was very important for me that Ukrainian position is heard.
Speaking via a translator, Zelenskyy added that Ukraine is still ready to sign the natural resources deal with the US that was put on hold last week. Now, in less than 24 hours, the US is poised to put a 25% tariff on most imports from Canada and Mexico and to double the levy on China. The trade changes come into force tomorrow and they apply to roughly $1.5 trillion worth of imports. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says President Trump may yet change his mind on Mexico and Canada.
They have done a lot, so he's sort of thinking about right now how exactly he wants to play it with Mexico and Canada, and that is a fluid situation. There are going to be tariffs on Tuesday on Mexico and Canada. Exactly what they are, we're going to leave that for the president and his team to negotiate, and obviously I'm talking to him all the time.
Lutnick there, speaking to Fox News Sunday's morning futures programme. Trump's team says the tariffs are a tool to change other countries' policies on migrants and drug trafficking. Yet they also threaten to reignite inflation and to throw North American supply chains into disarray. The US tariffs on China are set to come into force right as President Xi Jinping hosts the country's National People's Congress. China's strategic and economic outlook are expected to be announced at the event, and many expect major stimulus plans. Bloomberg's China correspondent Min Lo is also watching for how officials respond to the US tariffs.
You gotta wonder how long Beijing's patience will last, because at some point, if they feel that President Trump is not negotiating on good faith, they might shift towards a more aggressive and assertive stance as well.
Min Lo adding that China has so far seen a mixed economic picture this year. Although DeepSeek's AI breakthrough has driven a major rally in Chinese equities, household spending has been stubbornly weak due to a real estate slump. To other news now. Former Barclays chief Jess Staley is beginning a legal showdown today over his friendship with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The proceedings could draw in some of the most recognisable names in the City of London. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has more.
Today, Jess Staley will go to court to challenge a lifetime ban from the UK finance industry and findings that he recklessly misled regulators about his links to Epstein. It will be the former CEO's first public testimony about the event since his resignation in 2021. Up to this point, Staley has maintained he cut direct contact with the financier before taking his post. Witnesses who could be called by the Financial Conduct Authority over the 4-week trial include some of the sector's most eminent figures: Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey and Barclays Chairman Nigel Higgins. The case is the most high-profile legal battle between the watchdog and any executive in recent years. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
And lastly, Anora has dominated the 97th Academy Awards, winning 5 honours, including Best Picture. The film star Mickey Madison took home the prestigious Best Leading Actress award and thanked Sean Baker during her speech, who won, of course, the Best Director prize for his work on that film.
This is a dream come true. I'm probably going to wake up tomorrow. Thank you so much, Sean. I adore you. This is all because of you. Thank you.
Alongside Madison, Adrian Brody picked up his second career Oscar, scooping the Best Leading Actor title for his role in The Brutalist. Brody's win comes 21 years after first being awarded the honour for his work on the 2003 film The Pianist. So, those are some of our top stories for you this morning. Let's get to the markets right now. Defence spending in Europe, tariffs from the US, they are the key market drivers today. US Stocks 50 futures right now are jumping higher 0.7%. The euro is leading G10 FX gains. The euro against the dollar up this morning 0.4%. Bund futures gapping sharply lower does point to a 5 basis points thereabout rise in 10-year yields at the open. The expectation of additional defence spending across Europe. Bitcoin surged late on Sunday, crossed $95,000 after comments from President Trump, but the trade has softened this morning. So currently Bitcoin just above $93,000. Asian equities are also gaining. The Nikkei 225, the outstanding gain up 1.7%. US stock futures are higher. Japan's 30-year bond yield hitting its highest level since 2008. Those are the markets. So, right now, let's talk about our major story this morning. So, European leaders scrambling to repair relations between President Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelenskiy after that disastrous Oval Office clash, to secure Ukraine with a coalition of the willing and to bolster a European defence amid fears of an American pullback. Joining me now this morning to discuss is Bloomberg's UK correspondent Lizzie Burden and our senior editor Bill Fairies. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with me. Lizzie, can I just start with you? If we think about what happened on Friday, the Zelensky-Trump press conference that was really quite disastrous, the London summit yesterday with all of those European leaders gathering here, where do you think that leaves peace in Ukraine now?
Well, frankly, Caroline, that press conference on Friday couldn't have gone any worse. So the UK and France are now working on a plan to stop the fighting, which they'll then discuss with the US. You mentioned earlier, Tulsi Gabbard, the US Director of National Intelligence, has suggested that Volodymyr Zelenskiy would need to apologise publicly to President Trump if he wants the relationship to move forward. Zelensky, for his part, yesterday signalled that he would meet Trump if he were invited back. And over the weekend, Keir Starmer, France's Emmanuel Macron, Italy's Giorgia Meloni have been trying to get the two men back to the table because they still believe there's a narrow path to getting the minerals deal over the line. Macron told Le Figaro newspaper that some nations want a 1-month truce in Ukraine so that the talks about peacekeeping can play out. And indeed, it does come back to whether the US will provide this security backstop. Because when Starmer was in Washington, all Trump would say is that he'll always be there for British troops if needed. But as you know, under NATO Article 5, members only commit to backing each other when one of their territories is attacked, not when a NATO member's backing a non-NATO member. So if British troops are peacekeeping in Ukraine, will the US actually be there? That is the ultimate point that Vladimir Putin is testing, and we still don't have an answer. The NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said yesterday on the way out of the London meeting, the debate is ongoing. Starmer, though, said yesterday he's clear Trump does want a lasting peace, and that backstop is the definition of a lasting peace, at least in Ukraine's mind.
Bill, the Oval Office clash really shocked Europe. How big is the rift, do you think, between Europe and the US now?
Oh, it's huge. I think, if you go back to our mindset last week, Zelensky was going to Washington to sign this minerals agreement, which was really a way of keeping Ukraine in the conversation, keeping them near the negotiating table. So with the collapse, everything that we saw on Friday, that deal is at least currently off. And I think the Trump administration is going to say, if we're going to reach a deal now, you're going to have to agree to even more. So as perhaps unappealing as that minerals agreement may have seemed to Ukraine, I think that's just going to be an initial buy-in to really getting them closer to the negotiating table as the U.S. tries to accelerate these talks. I think the hurdle for Ukraine has gotten higher based on what we saw Friday.
And this, of course, as President Trump is preparing to land a barrage of tariffs. How do you think Canada, Mexico and China will respond? I mean, will they also be thinking about what is going on with Ukraine in how they, attempt to have negotiations? I mean, could there be another delay?
I think, the short answer is yes to all of that. I think there could be another delay. We've seen Mexico extraditing drug cartel leaders to the United States in the last few days, potentially as a way of trying to show that they're working on these fentanyl and drug trafficking issues that the president is focused on. We've still got 24 hours, more or less, in U.S. time. So there certainly could be a deal. And I do think, China, Mexico, Canada, I think everyone is trying to absorb how quickly U.S. policy has shifted since Donald Trump took office on January 20th. I think will tariffs end up being a negotiating tactic when it comes to helping, providing support for Ukraine? It's all in the realm of possibility. One thing from the U.S. administration that has been clear, though, we heard Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saying there will be tariffs of some sort now. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll get 25% like the president has initially promised, but I would be very surprised if they just kick the can another 30 days down the road without doing anything.
Okay, so that's on tariffs. Lizzie, returning to the point then, because these things are happening simultaneously, what about the UK's defence role when it comes to Ukraine and kind of peace in Europe and the costs? How are we thinking about that now?
So Keir Starmer's talked about a coalition of the willing, working out how Europe can defend itself without the US, how Europe can raise defence spending fast without waiting for every nation to get on board. So reasserting leadership in Europe post-Brexit and offering to be a bridge to Donald Trump. For the rest of Europe's part, of course, we look look ahead to that European Council meeting in Brussels on Thursday. They're going to discuss this €20 billion emergency package of aid for Ukraine, military aid. Macron suggesting that they should go as far as €200 billion. So we'll see in Brussels on Thursday on that front. But when it comes back to the UK domestic fiscal picture, really squeezed, as evidenced by our reporting, that as we head towards the March 26th spring statement, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves is planning to cut spending plans and demand that government departments really maximise productivity so that she can hit her fiscal rules. So previously we'd reported that the unseen early estimates of the Office for Budget Responsibilities forecasts suggested she would break her fiscal rules if she didn't course correct because of the weaker growth, because of the higher borrowing costs since the October budget. This appears to be how she will fix that. But as you might expect, it's not going to go down well with the backbenchers of the Labour Party. Starmer's already lost his international development minister over the decision to pay for extra defence spending with cuts to the aid budget. So some real political hurdles ahead for the Prime Minister.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.